Listeners, before we get today's mailbag podcast underway, we just wanted to give a quick Manscaped Man of the Match award to everybody who convinced us that Chicago and January do not go together at all. So we looked it up on Google Images, Chicago in January. It does not look very pleasant. And then we did some research. If you Google historical weather in January in Chicago, you'd be better off putting yourself in an ice bath and then wrapping that ice bath in an ice blanket and then dipping that ice blanket in some liquid nitrogen and then putting that liquid nitrogen in a glacier. So somebody who's a scientist can tell me if that's possible or not. But either way, that actually sounds better than going to Chicago in January. So thank you guys so much. What we did instead is we're going to do Chicago in April. So we already posted the link. It's actually... I think it's mid-April that we're going there. So either way, just make sure you reserve your spot. The link is there. It's on the weekend of April 16th, 17th. So I know it's a long ways away, but just thought I'd just throw it out there. So we're booking a lot of this stuff in advance so you guys have all the advance you need. And yeah, thank you. And a quick reminder that you can actually get 20% off all Manscaped products over on manscaped.com with the code ManagingMadrid. So thank you for everyone who won the award this week, and thank you for convincing us that Chicago is not a good idea in January. And without further ado, here is another great mailbag with Lucas and myself, Kiyan Sobani. Let's go.
Nice article in the Managing Madrid blog. Wonderful lads that do a great job there. And worth reading about that man there. Karim Benzema needs to rest, and the numbers reveal why.
Hello and welcome to a Thursday mailbag edition of the Managing Madrid podcast. Riding high on a crazy semifinal yesterday, dramatic, some would even call unjust. But at least we have our finalists now, and Italy, England, from a ratings perspective, is going to pop. So we'll bring that forward to another date. We'll also, we can just brush over the fact that Real Madrid announced that they're playing a preseason game against Rangers at Ibrox later in the month. And that's kind of relevant because last mailbag, Lucas and I were talking about like what's going to happen with preseason and stuff. Probably stay in Madrid. At least we know that they're going to venture a little bit outside their country, but probably not farther than that. And Sergio Ramos also signed for PSG today officially. We kind of knew it was going to happen for about a week now. But seeing him in a PSG jersey kind of made me throw up a little bit. I don't know how you felt, Lucas, but it's kind of a really weird image. I don't know, even, like, would you say as weird as the Ronaldo in a Juventus jersey when we first saw it?
Maybe even weirder, yeah. Ramos, at the end of the day, has been at Real Madrid longer than Cristiano Ronaldo was. He was also the team captain, so I don't think it should have come down to this. We've talked about this in the past, and I don't think Ramos should have ever worn another jersey than Real Madrid's, and definitely not PSG, considering that they're also an elite club still competing with Real Madrid for trophies. It's not the same as if he were to retire in Qatar or China or whatever. That's way different, because at the end of the day he wouldn't have retired for Real Madrid either, but he wouldn't have competed against Madrid for trophies, even if only the two clubs only compete for the Champions League. But at the end of the day, it's pretty much a player is still able to contribute playing for another club when it shouldn't have come down to this. So it's disappointing, yeah.
So our first patron question is from Thomas Gentry. He says, who would you rather have for a game? Real Sociedad version of Martin Odegaard or the Euro 2020 version of Pedri? Wow,
Look,
this question is a banger. It's like maybe we should have saved this for the end, like when we warmed up a little bit. Maybe we should have started with some low-hanging fruit. This question's like a final.
I'm not a big fan of Pedri. I think he's a bit overrated right now. Like I get it that his potential is definitely very high and all that, but the fact that he played every single minute in every game for Spain this early in his career, it's a bit not deserving for me. I don't think he's done enough in his career as a footballer, or his level as a footballer right now is high enough for him to get that kind of role in a team which was supposed to compete for the trophy at least. So that's that's one thing, but at the end of the day, I would still have to pick Pedri over Odegaard. I think that Odegaard was impressive, definitely. Maybe his importance within Real Sociedad was bigger than Pedri's importance in Spain's system, but I think Pedri proved himself at a higher level than Odegaard did that season. Sorry, even Odegaard didn't have that kind of pressure that Pedri probably did leading Spain in this tournament. It's not the same to lead Spain than to lead Real Sociedad. The expectations definitely aren't that high for Real Sociedad. So I would probably pick Pedri. Yeah,
I think Pedri right now is the better player. What he's like in terms of, at least based on pure form and what's happened in the last 12 months or so, he's played for Barca pretty much all the time. Heavy minutes. He's played every game in the Euros, every minute of the year, almost every minute of the Euros. Maybe he did play every minute of the Euros. Like, I have to double check that. But
yeah, I think he was substituted in an extra time or whatever. But
yeah. And Odegaard has never had that top level experience at a big club and at an international tournament like that. So he's never reached that height. He hasn't reached that height yet. I mean, it's not to say he's not going to, but he hasn't yet. If I had to pick Pedri 2020, and that means Euro 2020, not the year 2020, you know what I mean? But versus Martin Odegaard of 2019, 2020 at Real Sociedad, I'd choose Odegaard. That guy was a monster in those first 6 months. I mean, he pretty much was doing everything for Real Sociedad. He was elite in terms of like just chance creation. He was one of the best in the entire league at creating chances, key passes. He was top 5 in through balls, passes into the penalty area, progressive passes. So, and just like his incisive passing and all that stuff was incredible that season. I think this is interesting. This question is really interesting for a variety of reasons for me. One, because it's a good example of like, we just don't know, like predictions are impossible. How many of us really knew who Pedri was 2 years ago?
Yeah.
So if you asked us, there's even like 1 year ago, last summer, if you asked us who's better, Pedri or Odegaard, 99.9% of the answers would have been Odegaard, because we didn't really know who Pedri was. And it's just so like, who's going to be the guy next year where someone asks us who's better, and we would have been thinking you're crazy to even ask that question. But there's going to be someone else a year from now who's on our radar that we just either we didn't know about or we've barely seen or hasn't taken that leap yet. So I find this question really interesting for that reason. Predictions are difficult. That's one. Two, it's actually like I really like both of these players, and I actually think in some ways they're mirrored or inverted versions of each other. I mean, like Pedri has played on the right side before, but if you put Pedri on the left center midfield and Odegaard on the right in a single team, you might suffer a little bit defensively. But from a pure like possession and pressing and chance creation standpoint, that's pretty fun to watch. They're both very good at specific things, and they share common traits in a lot of ways in terms of their pass, for example, what Pedri did with his passing accuracy in this tournament was amazing. Odegaard's also a terrific passer. Odegaard's slightly more daring with his passing, though, so his passing completion is going to be a little bit lower than Pedri's. Odegaard's a little bit more final-oriented than Pedri is. But if you pair them together, that might actually balance it out in a nice way, and they might complement each other. I also think Pedri's probably going to be a slightly better goal scorer. He's a little bit more daring with his shots and getting into those goal scoring positions than Odegaard is, and Odegaard's more of a pass first type player. And I actually think from the left center midfield position, there's two players who really stand out for me. If I were to build my team around, I'd really think those two, and one of them is Pedri, the other is Mason Mount. I really like what Pedri did in the Euros. I actually think it's also kind of cool to ask this question because one player plays for Barcelona, one player plays for Real Madrid, and this might actually be the next Modric versus Xavi debate for the next 6 years or so. I don't know. It'd be interesting to track this.
Yeah, Odegaard needs to improve a little bit for us to reach that kind of debate this season. At least show some improvements with Real Madrid and show and potentially earn a spot as an undisputed starter. We still have to see him do that in not only in Real Madrid but also I mean in Arsenal during his first few months there. Obviously he struggled a little bit, so it's not that like Odegaard is ready to for that debate yet. I don't think so. We still have to wait and see.
He also needs to stay healthy.
Yeah.
Matt and I talked about his injury concerns Tuesday, and then there's a question about it this week coming up. So the next question is from Alexis Ceniceros. He says, what are your predictions on who will win the Copa America and also the Euros? Who will be the man of the match for those two? P.S. I hope